welcome to this technical session, The Geometry of Global Trade, Building New Routes Through Emerging Frameworks. Uh, the center of global trade and connectivity is shifting rapidly. We are looking at new locations in the global south which are emerging as new poles around which the maritime connectivity and trade frameworks of the future are shaping up. Now, to strengthen such a connectivity, we need robust mechanisms of financing. And to discuss this and more, we have a fantastic panel here today. So I'll straight away start with the questions here. Godwin, if I can start with you. Godwin is Associate Professor and Coordinator of the Ocean Governance and Blue Economy Center at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs in Nigeria. And Godwin, if you could please share with us the mechanism and institutions which you think are pioneering efforts to bolster South-South cooperation in financing new maritime corridors.
Thank you very much, the coordinator. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen and co-panelists. It's my pleasure and privilege to be here. Clearly, when we talk about the geometrics of trade, the topic itself is inviting us to reconsider the increasing strategic shifts that we have now in contemporary international economic relations. Before now, the nexus has been between the United States, or North America generally, Europe, and then, of course, East Asia. But with the emergence of new centers of influence and resourcefulness and capacity, we now see Africa, we see Asia, part of Asia, East Asia, we see the Middle East and other areas, as we saw in the morning, emerging as centers of significance. What this means, therefore, is that we are being invited to interrogate some of the implications of this. From what the moderator has asked me to focus on, the institutional context in which this is going on, I like to focus on the regional arrangements that have emerged over time. We're looking at, say, in the case of Europe, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Body. In the case of the Indo-Pacific region, we have, of course, the economic framework of that region. In the case of Africa, we have the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And then, of course, we cannot but mention BRICS and its new partners. All of these frameworks are throwing up significant and new prospects and challenges that now redefine the context of international trade as we know them. And I am sure that in order not to monopolize the discussion, I'm sure that my colleagues will throw up different dimensions of the focus that we ought to be looking at. The first and most important point for me, before I hand over the mic, is the fact that it is critical and imperative for this new, or if you like, this emerging discourse on the relevance and the significance of the global south for international trade to focus on regional interconnectivity. And it is the only context in which, in my opinion, the whole notion of the dependency of the global south on the north can be redefined and the opportunities and prospects that comes with them, particularly in the maritime sector, can find a new lease of life. I'm sure I will have another opportunity to elaborate on some aspects of your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Godwin. Kwong, let me go to you next. You come from a particular location where the experiment of regionalism has been relatively successful. So could you let us know if forums such as ASEAN can be effective in harnessing broader frameworks of investment in maritime connectivity architectures?
Thank you very much for your question. I would like to say that right now ASEAN is just not just a regional bloc, but also a strategic platform for conversion of interest. So right now we believe that ASEAN can act as a co-investment platform for maritime cooperation and so connectivity. So I would like to give you some example about this. First of all, right now we in August this year we have ASEAN cooperation pipeline, infrastructure pipeline, which focus on the sustainable projects like digital infrastructure project or the clean energy project or renewable energy projects. And we try to connect them as through our cross ASEAN partners and some countries and investors from some country, particular different countries like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia can approach such projects. And newly we have new members, Timor-Leste This happened a couple of days ago. You may hear about these issues. And we believe that some undeveloped members like Timor-Leste can approach sub-projects throughout this pilot infrastructure, ASEAN pilot, infrastructure pilot. Secondly, we have a kind of ASEAN infrastructure funds, is a kind of cooperation between ASEAN and ADB, Asian Development Banks. Throughout the financing initiative like this, we believe that such initiative can bring us more funding for countries, particular developing countries throughout the region. And thirdly, we believe that ASEAN can act as maritime corridor leadership, which meaning that ASEAN right now can act as a kind of coordinator between some initiatives, for example, in Indonesia and Thailand. Indonesia right now, they have a kind of Indonesia Global Maritime Forum, and Thailand, they have maritime, Eastern Maritime corridors. So ASEAN can act kind of coordinator among the kind of initiative corridor like this. And we believe that it can strengthen connectivity throughout the regions. And we hope that in the near future, like my colleague here just say, in Africa, we hope that ASEAN can act as a coordinator between our members and the African countries to BRICS, because right now we know that we have a new development within BRICS, and Vietnam right now we are not yet the partners, official partner, but we are observers. But some countries in ASEAN is a member of BRICS, like Indonesia or Thailand, right? So we hope that ASEAN can act as the coordinator between the ASEAN members and BRICS members throughout this, and we can strengthen connectivities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me turn next to you, Victoria. You've done some pioneering work on urban and regional development, and we know that cities play a very important role in emerging as hubs, very important hubs in catalyzing growth and prosperity when we are talking about an overall global connectivity architecture or global trade architecture. So how do you think can new finance mechanisms boost capital into developing cities within the larger system of global trade and maritime communication?
Okay, so good afternoon, dear colleagues, and thank you for your question. Yes, and the world is becoming multipolar, and the new architecture of maritime trade is undergoing significant changes with new financial instruments, and the developing countries are rapidly developing new and alternative maritime roads, which requires also some new financial mechanisms. And one of the important example of such mechanism within the framework of BRICS countries is NDB, New Development Bank. So created by the BRICS countries 10 years ago, and the purpose of this financial instrument is to finance and give some support to sustainable development projects. And key areas of financing is like clean energy and development of transport infrastructure, including maritime infrastructure and the modernization of water supply systems, and development of social and digital infrastructure, and urban development, of course, if we were talking about coastal areas and port cities. As for the end of 2025, more than 100 projects have been approved and supported by this bank, including ensure water security in Brazil and modernization of infrastructure of the Murmansk seaport city in Russia, and digital supply chains in India, and also carbon neutral airport in China, and also some climate sustainable agriculture in South Africa. And if you're talking about Iran, it's also an important project of processing technologies and conservation of marine genetic resources. So such interregional mechanisms accelerate the development of local competencies in project management and stimulate regional integration. And at the same time, modern financial institutions just like this are creating a fundamentally new model for the development of trade and maritime trade and seaports infrastructure in developing countries. And this innovative approach is different from traditional one, because when we're using these approaches, we're mainly focusing on regional priorities instead of global standards. So And it's including flexibility of terms and prompt approval of projects, and of course guarantees and equity participation of all parts. So this is my answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, when we talk about maritime connectivity and financing mechanisms of to boost maritime connectivity, I think over the years the urgency to incorporate green transition in maritime connectivity and maritime trade, logistics, etc., has emerged as a very important pivot. And I'm going to turn to you, Sayed, now, because Iran's case is very interesting, which has for long been one of the major producers of oil and gas. So, what does an Iranian view into this need for green transition look like? How do you think can Iran navigate the need for green transition, especially given the fact that it has been for long such a major producer of oil and gas?
Thank you very much. Actually, I would like to thank you and your colleagues for such an initiative, interesting initiative. With regards to the Iran and the Iran oil-based economy, I would like to a little bit contextualize the situation that the development in the global south in general and West Asia in particular has long been suffered from geopolitical tensions and some exogenous limitations. Amongst them, the Iran's imposed unilateral coercive measures, mainly by US, called sanction, and also the recent Trump's tariffs machinery are of the most discussed ones. Maritime sector by no means has never been an exemption, and given the Iran's geopolitical position, such kind of the limiting measures on Iranian investment has affected the maritime sector in the whole region, particularly in Indian Ocean sphere. So any regional South-South framework needs to take such exogenous damaging forces into consideration. Regarding the Iranian inherently oil-based economy, there is an emerging pattern that has brought green transition from a luxury and marginal option into the center of the policy attention. The sharp increase in domestic consumption, in addition to heavily sanctioned and underinvested oil sector, has pushed Iran inevitably to look for alternative scenarios, not only to guarantee its internal demand, as well as safeguarding export revenues from energy resources that Iran is needed for to guarantee its market share. So last year, there was a policy proposed by President Pezeshkian himself to support a rapid increase in the share of the solar energy from the Iranian electricity market. Such an inevitable green transition could be highly expedite and prioritized in maritime industry if there was a regional multilateral framework facilitating green investment in the sector, particularly away from US unilateral limiting measures. Coming from a very recent briefing by the Iran's vice president and a special envoy in maritime development, I was in a meeting that he was saying that the position itself is a new position, politically appointed by the President Pezeshkian, reflecting the importance of maritime development as a driver of Iranian future economy. From this point of view, I would say that the Iranian policy towards maritime development has multiple targets to meet. First of all, it is a vital role in the main national economic driver out of traditional oil-based economy towards an important player of regional cooperation. Also, it's a way to move beyond the solid wall of unilateral sanctions, possibly, to bring, and also the maritime development and regional cooperation on maritime development could enable Iran to deliver the Herculean geoeconomic projects like INSTC into the reality after several years of delay. At the same time, domestically, it could provide a platform for local participation of the local businesses, and particularly the suburb areas. Iran is very centralized in terms of the economic development, and the seasides are to some extent poor areas in Iran. So it creates an opportunity for those regional communities to be much more developed based on the maritime policy. Last but not least, internationality is going to facilitate an alternative for the unilateral international order on the basis of bilateral and regional frameworks like BRICS and Indian Ocean cooperation. So Iran is thinking about the maritime development as a way and as a kind of the short way for green transition that is to some extent inevitable, and it's against the background traditional oil-based economy of Iran. But green transition is something that is possible and very much politically, a lot of political will is behind that because of the current situation that we are facing with.
Thank you very much. I think when we are talking about questions of environmental sustainability, it's also very important to focus on the aspect of partnerships and how South-South cooperation can really, in a sense, drive the need to incorporate environmental sustainability, because importantly also the way the global South views the question or the need of environmental sustainability would invariably differ from that of, let's say, the West or the non-global South for that matter. So Khalid, my question to you would be, what kind of collaborative models do you think can the global South build to accommodate the demands of environmental sustainability?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and good afternoon, everyone. Actually, before talking about the collaborative models, because we have a set of collaborative models that we can suggest, we need to know that these models should rely on a notion. The notion of connectivity, when we talk about corridors, either emerging corridors or existing corridors, because we're talking about global supply chain, which is based on one word that we need to understand. This word is called integration. So global supply chain, it's about integration. And if you look for the world order from the polarity, so during the Cold War, about the bipolarity or unipolarity or multipolar, even world order, you find that some financial instruments and some financial framework are imposing some programs. So if we need to think about how can we develop from the practical point of view, the global South, we need to suggest models based on integration. From my point of view, I suggest quickly 4 proposed models. First, we do need integrated regional, what's called regional green corridor. These regions, when regions talk to each other, because at the end you are serving trade going through the global supply chain. I'm from Egypt. When I'm saying global trade, we are in India. We have Suez Canal, one of the main maritime routes globally. So we can say we have up to 17% of the trade crossing through the Suez Canal 2023 coming from India. 2024 it was doubled. So you need to talk about what is called, we can develop under this model, collaborative model, the integrated regional model. You can have what's called the green corridor maritime route or low emission. So this is one model. Another model, you find many banks initiated, like, for example, the Asian, say, Infrastructure Investment Bank or the African Development Bank or even the New Development Bank released from BRICS. So these banks at the end, because they need to what's called eliminate the dominance of other existing financial institutions. So at the end, why not to have what is called the integrated infrastructure investment program. So those banks can work together in integration and partnership to develop either dry ports, seaports, vessels, shipyards, etc., all those logistics engines within the supply chain. The third one, when we talk about integration, I heard in many sessions talking about the collaboration between private and public partnership. We say talking about triple P, joint venture, concession, etc. And we can find many models even in Asia for some either public or private in some ports. But actually, I'm insist and focus on, because I came from academic pathway. Why not to have what is called PPA, public, private, and academic? This is very important to have an integrated, because at the end you can reduce what is called smart logistics solutions that can facilitate and enhance the trade within the global growth. The last model I suggest, due to the time, I have another list of models. We talk about digitalization. So we need more governance, more transparency, more exchange data. So we do need one collaborative model about the integrated, either regionally, because international it will be more challengeable. So regional integrated digital platform where you exchange data about all, not only the climate change and sustainability, but even regarding all supply chain issues, and let us to say it's supply chain drivers. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, Godwin, I'm going to come back to you again. With the rise of the global south in the maritime trade architecture across the world, certainly we are seeing the rise of new locations, new countries, new economies are blooming across the world in terms of how they are enhancing engagement by way of trading more and more and sort of pumping money into the overall financial architecture around the world. So as new countries emerge, certainly what will follow is that new trade corridors are also going to emerge. Now, do you think there are some challenges that the global south overall faces in terms of financial institutions that are sort of powering these trade corridors? What kind of challenges do you think they are confronting?
Thank you very much, Coordinator. Yes, there are quite a number of challenges that one can reflect upon. The first is the fact that these are institutions that have basically are latecomers on the international financial sense. There are certain established standards and processes. Clienteles have been basically fixed. The logic that drives these things are profit-oriented and other considerations which we can take all evening debating and talking about. But for the global south, a major challenge will be the fact that they are, and I think I mentioned that in the morning, the capital base for them is really very, very, very insufficient. In fact, in some cases, insignificant, given the huge infrastructural gap that we have, not just in the maritime sector, but across all the other critical sectors of the global economy. Now, let me quickly say that if we are to wait until the global south musters enough capital to engage with all these challenges, we might have to wait for decades, and time waits for no one as far as international economic relations and finance is concerned. So if you ask me, the first thing I would say as a solution is that we need to begin to rethink the nature of collaborations between these international financial institutions. I think the focus must change from what the bottom line is to the degree of impact that they have. What are the number of projects that have been put together? How does it impact on the critical questions of employment, of gender, of security? These are the new criteria that I think should inform the kind of challenge that is thrown up by the inadequacy of capital, for these new financial institutions. They are also very fragmented, and as I've mentioned before, they don't have this central coordinating body. You have currency issues, okay? And I am very glad that the new development bank, the Islamic Development Bank, the African Development Bank, ASEAN, and many other countries, many other institutions and mechanisms from the global south are beginning to focus on issues of the local exigencies of finance, local currency, for example. The dollarization of the international financial system, as we all know in this room, has been a very critical issue for development financing in the third world. We must also not forget to mention that as far as these financial institutions go, the critical issue, and here before I mention that critical issues, this integration that we're talking about is not just in terms of physical, there are also virtual elements to it. And so we also need to begin to address the digital connectivity challenge that these financial platforms have. Yes, we are seeing increasingly the emergence of e-finance and other forms of platforms that have helped significantly, but the truth remains that so much has to go into these processes. The global digital system, just like the broader international financial system, also draws significantly from the dominance and the hegemony of what you have in the West. And I'm glad that India and China and other major countries of the global south, are beginning to come up with frameworks and processes and mechanisms that is not just challenging this dominance, but it's also redefining the context in which they will operate and undermine. They are operating and undermining the global south. There are quite a few other issues, but if I go beyond this, I think I'll be depriving my colleagues opportunity to also have their say. So I will hold on for now until maybe you get back to me later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, when we are looking at the global south, I think it's very important and to be cautious of the fact that the global south, in fact, is not one cohesive bloc. There are several actors within the global south, and in many cases, it appears that each of the countries or a group of countries are sort of pursuing their own sort of pathways and strategies in terms of looking for mechanisms to finance maritime connectivity architectures. Now, I'm going to turn to you, Kwang, and my question to you would be this: do you think that sometimes the fact that we see global south countries often competing with each other in terms of generating mechanisms of financing connectivity architectures or being part of several institutions at a global or a regional scale. So do you think competition within the global south as such is something that is healthy, or do you think there needs to be done more to sort of generate some kind of alignment within the broader global south? Is that even possible?
I believe that is a healthy or unhealthy depend totally on how you implement the idea of competitions. Because we believe that we cannot have development without competition, with healthy competition. But what's the meaning of healthy competition? We believe that healthy competition means innovation and strategic autonomy. So whether is a competition between the maritime corridor or between the port development across the region, we believe that it could be defined according or towards to healthy competition. Like for example, right now, I give you example. For example, right now we have to compete with Singapore, one of the most developed and attractive port in Asia right now, and Vietnam. We try to develop the Map TV port. It's one of the 20 biggest port in the world to reach that capacity. Yes, it could be healthy if we, through innovation, through the AI digital, in making AI digital infrastructure more robust, more adaptive, we can make our port can reach the level of the port of Singapore. Yes, it's healthy. But it could be unhealthy if we do not the kind of the fragmented rules, which mean that each region, each country, each corridor have different rules. For example, the question of the e-signature. Each country, each region, each corridor have different rules governing each e-signature. Whether or not we recognize e-signature from Africa, for example, from Nigeria, from my colleagues here, when a shipping owner bring that to the counter partner in Vietnam, do the e-signature recognize? I think not, because right now we apply the different rules. So that's a question for the competitions, right? So I believe that if we do not find the cooperation in competition, we cannot have a healthy development. So I believe that throughout the cooperation, throughout the forum, throughout the regional organization, like India's RIM Association, Africa Union, ASEAN, we can harmonize the rules to facilitate the chats, to facilitate cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think when we are talking about connectivity, the very nature and character of connectivity in itself is undergoing a churn. When we talk about maritime connectivity, it is not just about connectivity on the seas. It's also about multimodal or intermodal connectivity, because how the logistics is carried on by rail or road and then shipped to several continents. I think the whole of it is what we know as connectivity today. So, Victoria, my question to you would be, in your view, how do you think can we look for new avenues to finance this very changing or shifting nature of connectivity that we are looking at?
Okay. I think that combination of government initiatives and innovative approach and international cooperation will ensure the sustainable development of the international intermodal transportation system. So in order to find new ways to finance intermodal infrastructure and modernize the fleet, so it is important to take into account the set of measures that can attract both public and private investments on cooperation, and it's important to take into account cooperation between governments and private entities. So, and for example, if we are talking about human impact to the climate change and environment, initiatives are becoming very crucial. So the development of environmentally friendly modes of transport and hybrid transport and schemes and encouraged by government, maybe also with some tax benefits. And companies can invest also in more fuel efficient vehicles or electric trucks and hybrid solutions to meet environmental regulations and sustainable development goals. So of course, government support is important, and some investment programs with focus on green infrastructure and green initiatives can support such projects. And in Russia, we are implementing a strategy for the development of the seaport infrastructure until 2030, and including it, this strategy also including the modernization of the fleet with systems for receiving, processing ship waste in port areas in order to minimize marine pollution. And if we talk about international financial instruments that could support such projects, it's also like NDB, New Development Bank, is also focusing on such environmental initiatives. So I think this is the way to proceed this. Thank you.
Thank you. So one of the challenges that we've seen over the years with traditional legacy finance institutions is that often packages or mechanisms that have come out of these institutions have rendered sovereignty of global South countries vulnerable. So my question to you, Syed, would be, how do you assess the question of sovereignty in the framing of new institutional mechanisms to finance the maritime sector, especially the ones that we are potentially talking about, the ones which come out of the global South as a result of South-South cooperation?
Okay, thank you. Actually, I think that is a very right and timely question, because we are living in the era of protectionism, nationalism, digital nationalism, technology nationalism, and it's a kind of the moving beyond the globalization era that we had in last decades. But with regards to the cooperation frameworks that we are thinking of or we are discussing about, I think any countries that they are thinking seriously about being part of such a framework needs to move beyond the traditional perspective on sovereignty. So we need to think of a kind of the balance between traditional ideas of sovereignty and much more open space for cooperation. I would say as long as we are looking for regional cooperative framework and regional financial and investment institutions that all the countries, we call global South countries or regional countries, are in the governance of those institutions, rather than traditional international organizations that they are very instrumental, for example, in the case of Iran, in implementing unilateral coercive measures like SWIFT that finally was the instrumental in the sanctions. So as long as we are looking for having regional, more cooperative framework, I think it would be a kind of the balance based on the mutual respect and mutual trust. So particularly in some projects that everyone is going to benefit from. For example, we are now in India. India has been very much interested in investing on Chabahar port in Iran. And also at the same time, Russia and Central Asian countries are very much interested to finally have INSTC being materialized on the ground. So as long as those kind of the countries, they have mutual interest on some very important projects, we could think of such kind of the frameworks that at the same time is cooperative and also is respecting the sovereignty of the host countries. So we need to think of a new balance between traditional perspective on sovereignty and some open space and more flexibility for cooperative investment and co-investment in main projects. That's my take on your question.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Global South is not only not very cohesive as a group or a group of countries or as a bloc, but it is also very scattered in terms of its geographical contours, right? Now, Khalid, my question to you would be, in the coming decade, now that conversations on the Global South have really sort of kicked off on a positive note and people are taking note of the Global South by itself is also very vocal. Uh, which are some of the zones that you think are likely to drive the financing revolution in the coming decade at least?
Thank you very much. Very important question. When you go regarding the defining the geographic zone, from my point of view, the Global South has the opportunity and necessity to redefine, we call it in connectivity globally, the nodes. Those zones, geographic zones, are the nodes. I can change the links regarding multimodalism, regarding the time, cost, etc., about the volume. So from my point of view, let us to start from Africa. We have the east and west, I think, the coastal zones. Those countries are working and expanding their port capacity, developing their infrastructure, either through the financial institutions or even by national governments, and increasing the number of the dry ports. So those are very important, especially if we're talking about the Global South. The second zone is Suez Canal, because from my point of view, any emerging corridors is expanding, increasing alternatives, but not replacing the existing links in the corridors globally. Because you're talking about the global supply chain stability and the scale of the global supply chain international trade. So in Suez Canal, they have Suez Canal Green Corridor Initiative. And this is actually attracted like Chinese and Russian investment in the Suez Canal economic zone. The third zone, it's the Red Sea and GCC countries, because these countries and this region, they are focusing on intermodality and multimodal as well. And this actually, in a way, will enhance the flow through any emerging pathway. The last one is in East and Southeast Asia, those countries as well, where you can find they're increasing and expanding their port capacity and the connecting with the global trade. Those are briefly the four zones that should be taken into consideration in the Global South. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting. So we have a hard stop at 5 p.m., which is 13 minutes from now. I am going to open the floor for questions. But before that, I'm going to pose one common question for all of you. That is, what is that one challenge to your mind that you think needs to be mitigated most urgently when we are talking about building mechanisms of financing maritime trade and connectivity from the Global South? So perhaps we could start right from there and we can come down the block. And in the meanwhile, I request everyone to please start thinking about your questions. We have a very short window, but we hope to take at least 3 or 4 questions. Over to you.
Actually, from an Iranian point of view, I think the most important challenge is exogenous limitations on regional cooperation, particularly in the case of Iran, is the problem of the sanctions. So we need to find some way away from such kind of the limitations that has been imposed, mainly unilaterally on the cooperation between countries. It's not only about the Iran, it's about the Russia as well, and also just current mechanism called tariff is a new form of the sanctions that is imposed in most of the countries now.
Thank you. Quick 1-minute response.
I think the problem for the regional cooperation in terms of maritime development is now is a trust, lack of trust, particular strategic trust among countries in the Global South, because right now we seems to be divided because we follow the kind of very different interests each country have a different interest based on some different impacts. For example, right now is India have different approach regarding the maritime trade. Vietnam have different approach. Some countries in Asia have different approach regarding maritime trade, and even in terms of connectivity. Iran here, Russia, we have a different process. The question is how we can work together. That's the question I think is right now. Well, and more importantly, how we can work more effectively to create a multipolar world in order to make the maritime cooperations more effective.
Thank you. Khalid?
In 1 minute, the main challenge from my point of view is not concerning about the finance and investment in infrastructure. It's not about the technology, because you can train your staff, you can build your humanware beside the software and hardware just to tailor your triangle regarding the technology. But my point of view is concerning about the international governance. This is very important. If you talk about the trust, credibility, exchange information, about the collaboration, integration, you need to speak the same language, not only in terms of data collection, but in terms of international governance. This is a wide scope that we need to work under this umbrella for any type, any level of integration. As you know, integration levels, starting from national to global, through 7 levels of integration. It's based 100% on international governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria.
Okay. Okay, so I think that maybe the most important challenge is that we should understand that people are more important than technologies and all digitalization processes. Because now my colleagues say today that PPA is important. I think that PPP also is important. So public, private, and people. So maybe we should understand that climate changes and environmental protection is a crucial process that we should be unified for. So that's why I think this is the most important challenge. So we should understand that people are more important than digitalization and technologies. And maybe different standards in this digital world are also is a very big challenge for us. But even our dialogue today is important. So because we are talking about crucial points about environment and people. So this is my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you. Gordon?
Thank you very much. I think whatever level you are looking at, whether nation state or international, the challenge at all times for public policy is that of how to expand opportunities for all without leaving anybody or any sector behind. In this case, ladies and gentlemen, the truth about the matter is that competition is real. I mean, we can talk as a global south as one body, but when we go to our national capitals, you will pursue your national interest, I will pursue my national interest. And while we are supposed to be collaborating within the context of the global south, then we have the general competition against the global north. So the truth about the matter is that we will face this competition, and this competition could endanger our collective objective and goal as part of the global south. So if you ask me, the issue is how do we expand opportunity for all? The truth about the matter, if we must be frank with ourselves, is that what we should be seeking to do is not to replace the existing order. It is, however, to create alternatives such that the terrain is expanded, and irrespective of the national interest that you may want to pursue and the one that I want to pursue, we must all recognize our collective vulnerabilities and weaknesses when it comes to the established global institutions of the North. Unless the global South recognizes this as the main challenge, we can meet in India, in any part of the world. We can even decide to meet in the moon for eternity. The truth about the matter is that we will leave the bulk of our populations in the global South that make up the bulk of the humanity in this world behind. And I think that we will now be replicating and reproducing the challenges of globalization that we think that the global South should provide a credible alternative to. So finally, what I am saying is that the challenge is how to widen the scope of opportunities for all. And in our various capitals in the global South, we must recognize that we are not in confrontation, irrespective of what our diverse national interests are. And the only way to do this is to begin to build these commonalities of infrastructure, of common corridors, of dealing with issues that we know we can pursue without even achieving equality in returns for all, but nevertheless leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's now open the floor to questions. Can I Let's take 3 questions. One at the back. Could I request my colleagues to please hand a mic at the back? Please very briefly introduce yourselves and please try to keep your question very pointed.
Namaskar everyone, I'm Janvi Khubani from Rajasthan. My question is regarding the India-Russia relations that recently India and Russia are having their trade in the maritime sector through the Eastern Maritime Corridor connecting Chennai and Vladivostok. But we need to explore more in this regard because recently most of the fuel that we did was 40% from Russia. But the trends show that 20%, it's come down to 20% because India needs to diversify and there are certain risks on the Russian supply. So what more can we do in this regard?
Thank you. I saw a hand here. Let's collect some questions and then we can have a final round of.
Thank you. I'm a student of political science, and my question is with the US now moving in and sanctioning two major Russian oil companies and the EU diversifying away from Russian energy, how do you foresee the rerouting of Russian energy taking place in the future?
Thank you. Yeah, one question.
Hello. Thank you so much. My name is Shlok Gupta, and I'm an undergrad student of IR in public policy. My question is to Mr. Godwin. So recently, we've seen a lot of engagement within the global south between India and Africa, even with China and Africa, nearly on a competitive scale, right? And with India, Africa, we saw economy. With China, Africa, we saw BRI. Now, however, a lot of the engagement that is happening between India and Africa is security driven, whereas with China, we see dual use. So where does finance and trade figure in this engagement between India and China and more broadly, the global south-south?
Thank you. We'll take one last question and then we'll.
My question is for Jimmy sir. The way Nigeria.
Please introduce yourself and then.
Yeah, I'm Pooja. I'm a student of international relations. Sir, taking the success story of Nigeria in Afrocentrism, do you see India playing a similar role in the Indo-Pacific since we are at Sagar Manthan in India?
Thank you. So I think we can start from there again and then we can have your very quick responses and also if any final comments that you may have. Sayyid, over to you.
Actually, because there was no direct question with regards to myself, as far as I remember, just I would like to use this opportunity to add something to my previous point. Rather than just sanctions, I'm going to endorse and support the point that you raised about the role of the people. I think we need to have a kind of the more intellectual kind of the consensus in all countries that the global south countries need to work together. I know that in India, cooperation with China is not something very much interested about, but just I'm going to use this as an example that Iran signed a agreement, 25 agreement with China, but just in post the sign of the agreement, there was a huge kind of the discussion within the countries because it seems that most of the people still they are thinking about emerging economies like China and India and global south in general as not reliable. So still all countries to some extent is culturally and traditionally very West oriented. So we need to think of and work on our societies to be much more open and interested in regional global south cooperation.
Thank you. Kwong, any responses or final comments?
Yes, I totally agree with my colleague's idea here is now about the role of sanction in the world today. And we also observing the chance of the protectionism and terrorism in all kinds of trade, world trade right now. So I believe that right now we should redefine our strategy, not in terms of maritime trade, but also in terms of foreign policy, which means that we have to define not totally rival or totally partner or totally friends, but in terms of sectors, which means that one partner could be reliable partner in one sector, but could be enemy in another sector, or not enemy, but rival in another sector. For example, right now, I will give you a good example about this regarding China right now in terms of maritime trade. China is a good partner with Vietnam because it's one of the biggest trading partner with Vietnam. But in terms of maritime conflict, maritime sector, China could be seen as a rival, our rivals. So I think that's a time, is a good moment, a right moment to redefine our policy in terms of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Khalid.
Regarding the questions, just in a few seconds, regarding the global south, from my point of view, we can look for integrate rather than compete, which means when you look at on the earth, when you find how the flows of the trade, because I did thousands of simulation on this, you find 17% moving from north to south, 40% south-south, 36 east-west. When you map this on real corridors, any disruption, I calculated how it affected the macro GDP for those countries. So integration between global south with other corridors, this actually enhanced the mobility. And this is from the notion of the maritime transport. Maritime transport, thousands for different companies, shippers and shipping lines using the same route. So there is no isolation, there is an integration. This is what I want to focus, and rather than competition. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. I think you can just share your final comments for now.
So I remember the question about this new channel from Vladivostok to Chennai, and it is a very ambitious project actually between our countries. It is from last year, so now we have shortest way to deliver some goods from our country to India. So and about fuel, I didn't understand your question clear, but I think that it's just a very first step for our shortest roads development, and we are creating some R&D centers together. So we cooperate with scientific and educational fields. So I mean that maybe in the future it will be we will improve all of these aspects, and also regarding environmental protection. And the second question was about sanctions, right? So actually we have a lot of alternative ways to to cooperate with our partners around the world, and now we do not feel we do not feel any pressure from the sanctions. So because a lot of countries they have the same opinion like our country. So we are striving for some mutual dialogue between our partners, and yeah, multipolar world is a new way of thinking.
Thank you very much, Godwin.
Thank you very much. I had two questions. I think the concern about security and trade as it concerns our relations with India and China. The truth about the matter is that I don't see any distinction. Without security, you cannot have meaningful trade. And so it may not feature very high on the agenda of our discourse with China, security, for example. But I assure you that it is an underlying consideration at every point in time in the discourse. And security actually does reflect in the things that we do with India. In the area of the maritime, for example, we have quite a number of maritime defense pacts and arrangements, whether within the context of our bilateral relations or within the wider context of India-Africa maritime defense pacts. I know from my work in the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs that we have received quite a lot of delegations and deliberations with India in diverse sectors of the security constituency. Now, my sister has asked the most fundamental question underpinning Nigeria's foreign policy, which is the Afrocentric nature of our foreign policy. When in 1960 we joined the United Nations as the 99th member, one thing was clear for the world, that at last we now have a country that can speak for the black world. We have something in common with India. India is the largest democracy, correct? Correct? Well, Nigeria is the largest black democracy in the world. And we are very conscious of what that responsibility means. It also means that we will manage international relations with the minimal conflicts and crises possible. People have questioned why, for example, we didn't take the kinetic approach in dealings with the crisis of the ECOWAS. But my institution, as an advisory of government, will say it's too late in the day to begin to pick up arms against fellow African brothers. We sacrificed so much for the independence of many African countries. We sacrificed so much, in fact, to ensure that South Africa got liberated from apartheid and all of that. In fact, No matter how poor you were in Nigeria, you pay some level of tax to support the movement for the liberation of South Africa. My father was working in a factory, textile factory, and he was paying out of his mega money that could barely feed us in those days, still to the liberation. So it's not in 2025 that we will now take up arms against our brother Africans. So you are right. Africa remains the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy. And it may not look sensible to the world, but we are stuck to it. How does that fit into all of this that we are discussing? Well, we are saying that we need to reimagine the nature of trade. The geometrics of trade requires, my final words, the geometric of trade requires a reimagining from the zero-sum game that is associated with tariffs and deficits calculations to one where we'll build a system that is sustainable, that is equitable, and that will carry everyone along. Finally, the geometric of trade is still, the contours of global trade is still being redrawn. It is neither fixed nor final, but it calls for us all from the global south to begin to reconsider how we would reconnect with one another as a global south, because like I have always said, the global south is a latecomer on the international system, and we therefore need to begin to reconfigure this discussion in a way that will cancel out the very serious disadvantages that we have on the global international economic scene. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much. With that, we close this session, and on behalf of everyone present here, let me thank all of you for being here and sharing your insights.